Elizabeth, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, tell me a little bit about AZA Finance.
Sure. Well, AZA Finance is Africa's largest foreign exchange broker, treasury, and business payment platform. We operate across the African continent, and we work with companies that want to buy, sell, and settle African currencies.
Okay, and what countries are you currently operational in?
Well, we offer over 100 currency pairs,
Wow.
and we offer not just African pairs against each other, but also African pairs against G8 or global Asian currencies as well. We've entered Rossiello in our first South American pair, which is quite exciting, but we have coverage over 4 continents.
Okay, and when you founded AZA Finance, tell me a little bit about the founding story of the company.
Sure. Well, I was working in microfinance at the time across the continent, and one of the big issues that faced a lot of the CEOs of these financial institutions was the fact that there were no local currency financial products for them, for businesses. When they looked to get loans to grow their business, or they looked to partner with other companies, it was always in hard currencies, mainly the US dollar or euro. When you're operating in Kenya, Kenyan shilling, or in Nigeria, Nigerian naira, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have that exposure to the hard currencies. And it really ends up impoverishing a lot of these institutions, or really over-indebting them, because they have any foreign exchange loss no matter what they do. So the idea was to start out to offer African currency financial products.
Okay, and it occurs to me that this solution is incredibly efficient for cross-border payments, cross-border trade. What is the secret there, and what has been holding that up over the years?
Sure. Well, anybody that wants to operate across Africa knows that there's 55 currencies, lots of different markets. It's similar to the Europe before the euro. And when you're sending goods across the border or you're receiving services from across the border, you need to make a payment. But what I found when we started doing research with this company was that over 80% of payments that are between African countries or African countries in Asia or African countries in Europe are still being routed through the US dollar. So if we're able to allow customers to pay and receive business payments in African currencies, it eliminates the need to route that payment through the US dollar, saving time, money, and friction.
Okay, and there have been conversations over the years about Africa looking to move beyond the US dollar for trade. Do you think that is going to happen, or do you believe a solution like yours will continue to solve that pain point for many companies?
I think the solution is not binary. We're going to see more payments made in African currencies, but obviously as globalization continues, we're still going to have African markets trade with G8 markets as well, and we'll see those pairs. I don't think the dollar African currency pair is going to go away. What I do think is that if you're trading between Senegal and Ghana, you don't need to trade the US dollar. And if you're making a payment within East Africa, there's no need to first buy a US dollar. And certainly if you're a European company trading or offering services into Africa, we don't necessarily need to do anything but a Euro African currency pair. And you'd be surprised, 10 years ago when we started, there were very few financial institutions offering African currency pairs. Even today, some of the largest financial institutions around the world will only really offer 2 African currencies at a very high margin, and most interestingly, they still take over 3 to 4 days to settle, and up to 2 weeks. And if you're a mid-sized business, you're waiting 2 weeks for a business payment. That's 2 weeks of your working capital tied up.
You don't have to tell me. I'm waiting on a payment from Egypt right now.
Okay, yeah.
But what type of companies usually come to you and use your solution?
So we have about 3 different kind of main segments. So obviously the largest buyers of African currencies are remittance companies, donor agencies, and originally global government agencies. What's exciting is in the last 11 years we've seen the emergence of global payment companies. Companies paying Airbnb hosts, paying people working online remotely as an engineer. As the lot of working capital, and you saw remittance prices easily going above 10%, 15% in most sub-Saharan African markets. And that's not the case for South America or Southeast Asia. Since the rise of companies like AZA, and mainly us, I think we had a couple of articles, even year one, where MoneyGram and Western Union were quite worried about what we were doing. We've lowered the cost of doing business on the continent. And again, it's not just for remittances, it's also for payment companies, corporates, anybody that needs to buy and sell.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Now I got a few questions about yourself. You said you had worked with a lot of microfinance institutions before AZA. You know, what was your work on the continent? I guess what brought you to Africa? Because you don't sound necessarily like you've been here like myself.
No, I'm American and I worked in Europe, and I left it all to go work with Mohammed Yunus, who had just won the Nobel Peace Prize in microfinance in 2007, and he had started a joint partnership with a French company, Finance, and I worked for their rating agency. So I came down to Nairobi, Kenya in 2009, and I spent almost 8 years here on the ground doing a lot of field work, working from Malawi to Nigeria to Ghana to DRC, meeting with microfinance institutions, giving them ratings on their operations, looking in deep dive look into their financials, and helping the CEOs understand their foreign exchange position, how they were accessing lending capital, how they were financing their financial products, what the end cost to the individual lender was. And it was super interesting to see how inefficient the market was, mainly because so-called development lenders and development institutions were lending in hard currencies, which ultimately I found predatory in a lot of the reports that I wrote. So that's how we started out.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And happy to hear you've called Kenya home for a while, and now you're in London. Yes.
Yeah, I moved to Nigeria to start the business there. We moved to Senegal for 4 years and worked on opening the francophone market. Moved up to the UK during COVID. A lot of our African currency buyers are centered there. It's a big foreign exchange hub. So interesting to work in that part of the world, but we have a team of 200 employees across the continent, 7 offices, working closely with our clients on the ground, and we're still growing.
Okay, and how do you decide what new currency pairs to add? You know, is it typically a customer that comes to you saying, hey, I need Naira to, Chilean peso, or...
Yeah, well, obviously we try to be as much revenue driven as possible, so customers do come to us, and we hear enough customers talk about a market. We do a market entry analysis. We look at what the positions are on the left and the right hand side of the trading. We understand if we can come into the market, and then we get started. We entered a few markets this year already. Zambia and Egypt are 2 of them. A medium-sized market, quite big market. So we're very excited to announce that.
Okay, and beyond expanding into new markets, what does the future hold for us?
We're only just getting started. To do this type of business, you have to build the actual infrastructure and then the trading platform on top. So it was an infrastructure and a trading company combined. And that took a lot of capital, a lot of time and patience, waiting to get licensing, working on scaling our technology, being able to trade at volume and scale. So now we really feel like we're coming into our own. We're a Series C growth company, and we feel like we're only getting better and more efficient right now. So the future is really us growing revenue to that 100 million revenue mark, becoming more and more profitable, and taking over the rest of the continent.
Oh, that's great to hear. Now I have a few quick fire questions for you just to conclude for us today. So, first one, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Just get up and keep going.
Just get up and keep going. All right, I like that one. When you received your first paycheck, what did you spend it on?
A surfboard.
A surfboard.
I worked at a surf shop in New York. We're a bunch of Hawaiians, diaspora, of course, my specialty. And they taught me how to surf when I was 15.
Oh, exciting, exciting. I think I spent mine on a suit. Not quite as fun. Now, do you have free time? Or are you constantly working?
Well, I'm at an advantage. I'm female, so I optimize time better. I have 3 kids, 2 step-kids. I eat dinner with my kids almost every night that I'm not traveling. I just make sure that what I do is efficient. I was even teasing you before we started about the efficiency of this interview. As I grow older and I keep running this company, people want to live happy lives, so I make sure we do our work, get our work done. Sometimes that means talking a little fast, and then we get out of the office, we recuperate, and come back in to trade another day.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.